if you're someone who's neurodivergent, specifically someone who's autistic, one of the things that they talk about for autistic people is that we miss social cues. You don't understand social cues. And what does that mean? It's like the person's saying some words, but their body's doing something else. You're not really picking up to how their body and their words are misaligned. But if the missing social cues actually meant missing the red flags, missing the red flags, there is a high rate of women that are in unhealthy, toxic, abusive relationships that are autistic women. And they might not even know, because there's a lot of women who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s who are just finding out that they're autistic. And it's unlikely that you were going to be diagnosed with autistic when you were in school, especially if you were a girl, because 80% of girls remain undiagnosed by the age of 18, and they carry on the rest of their life. And a lot of them are carrying on in the rest of their lives in abusive, unhealthy, toxic relationships. What seems obvious to other people just totally goes over their head. As an autistic woman, you might have been called dumb, ditzy, dense. What are you, dumb? What are you, stupid? It's like, no, my brain is just processing information, and my brain is just processing social cues in a completely different way than a neurotypical brain does. So we grow up thinking that something is mentally wrong with us, that we're dumb, that we're just stupid for landing ourselves in these unhealthy relationships. When the truth is, it was no fault of our own. But what ends up happening is we go through our whole lifetime. And there's so many women, I've been coaching some women who are in their 60s, and they're only now realizing that they're neurodivergent. They're only now realizing that they're on the autistic spectrum. They're only now putting all these pieces together to be like, oh, that makes sense. And now I can honor that part in me. But now I've got a whole history of baggage that I'm carrying along. I got a whole lot of trauma that I endured as a result of my inability to understand social cues and my inability to notice red flags. Just because we have these traits that make us actually a target for abuse and unhealthy relationships, it doesn't mean that it's our fault, because the person who is taking advantage of our deficiencies, they're the ones who need to take responsibility. Let's dive a little deeper and understand why this is taking place, so that we can maybe have some insight of our past, and we can have some guidance moving forward. Now, the first thing that we got to look at for people who are autistic is you take things very literally. You are so literal. You do not understand sarcasm. Somebody can be saying something to you, and maybe they're lying to you, but you take their word for it. You take their word for it, because whenever you speak, your word is your word. You do not lie. You do not sugarcoat things. You say things as it is. Sometimes you're a little bit too blunt and you say things that are rude, like, sorry, I'm just being honest. You know, we have this part in us that it's really hard for us to lie. It really is. And I think that stems from our sense of justice, where we just can't. And then you're made to feel dumb and an idiot and stupid when it turns out that you find out that they were lying to you the whole time, right to your face. You discover that that's the case. So it's like, you can't win with this. And being very literal, you can't change that. You can't become not literal anymore. I am very aware how literal I am, and yet it still trips me up. Okay? I get tripped up by how literal I am all the time. And it's not until after the fact. And it creates kind of an awkward scenario. It makes communication very difficult, as I take people at their word. My mom tells me the story about, maybe I was 2 years old, and she was putting me in my room, and she's like, you're driving me crazy. You're driving me crazy. And then she closed the door, left me in my room, and she could hear me talking to myself saying, I don't drive. I can't drive. I don't know how to drive. My mom's telling me the story, but she's saying it like it's, you're so cute. But no, that is an indicator of how literal I was back then. And sure, as a kid, yeah, you don't understand that saying yet. You're driving me crazy. Okay. We don't know that that's a saying that people use. But that would continue to a certain level throughout my whole life. Or people would say, where are we going? We're going crazy. Oh, we are? We're going crazy. Okay, well, let's go. It's just a saying. And I remember my mother calling me dense one time, and I got so emotional. It hurt my feelings so much that she said that I was dense. I just didn't understand something. I had taken something so literal. And this literalness can also, within the relationship, cause a lot of problems. So this is where it comes to the red flags. Because we're very literal and we rely heavily on people's words as the truth, we take things for face value. We believe the words, we believe what they're saying, but then we're missing the cues in their facial expressions, their body language, even their tone of how they're saying it. Because they're saying something, but the tone is different. That's why we don't understand sarcasm. The sarcasm is said in a certain tone, but I don't get that tone. I don't understand what that tone is. Sarcasm, to me, there's always truth in sarcasm. That's what I've learned to tell myself. If somebody is saying something sarcastically as a joke, there's always truth in there. Nothing is actually really a joke. You know, if it's a joke, I would be laughing at it. I'm not laughing at it because I'm taking your sarcasm literally. So that's the thing. If you're missing the vibe, and you're only hearing the words, something's not jiving, and then you're asking about it, the way you ask about it might be off-putting to them, and it might cause a whole different conflict on another level than what they were initially talking about. I mean, someone could be yelling at me, that's obvious, and degrading me and being really mean to me. But I might hear those words that they're saying and take them very personal and not see that as a red flag in them, but as a problem in me. I need to be different so that this person won't speak in that way anymore. Now, the other thing that goes along here, missing the red flags, and another reason why women, autistic women specifically, are drawn towards unhealthy relationships. We are, for some reason or another, attracted to the misfits, the outcasts. I remember in high school, I started hanging out with a group of kids who were all smokers. And it's funny because these were the guys growing up. They were on probation. They were on youth probation for stealing, doing break and enters, who knows what else. And I was dating one of the guys, and he was on probation. And later in life, what did I become? I became a probation officer. And I think that I was drawn to the outcasts because I felt like an outcast. I felt like I was not understood. So I felt more accepted, and I just felt more comfortable around people who were also like that. Not to say that they were the best for me. And I think that's why I was drawn to work in the field that I worked in. I wanted to have one-on-one interactions with people who were seen as outcasts and misfits because I wanted to help them get on the straight and narrow. I wanted them to feel accepted. I wanted them to know, like, hey, I know you've done something that's unacceptable to society, but you don't have to be that way. And then I would do that with partners too. I would choose partners who maybe were struggling in their own life, and oh, I will come and help you. And let's not forget the other trait of being neurodivergent is you don't like small talk. Remember? Small talk is not very interesting to you. You like to skip over the small talk and get into the deep talk. You like to get into the philosophical conversations, the sharing your deep personal stories with people. And that would accelerate the relationship with that person that you were forming. These relationships would be formed a lot faster than had you gone through the whole small talk phase first. And it actually speaks to the benefit of small talk because the small talk leads to deep talk. Small talk allows you to maybe just allow yourself to pick up some social cues if you can. through the small talk. Like allow that to be a little testing ground before you get into the deep talk. But we don't do that. We get right into it. And we're being tested to see if we are someone who doesn't have any boundaries. We are being tested to see if we don't have any boundaries because we'll test us through love bombing. Will tell us how great we are, how beautiful we are. They will tell us how they've never met anyone like us to make us feel really seen, if you will. Because otherwise we're not seen. Remember, we're in the outcast misfits category. We are not being seen, but now we're being seen. And that's the love bombing. And love bombing, even being sexually harassed to an autistic girl, is just simply attention. It's just attention. Oh, this person thinks I look nice. Oh, they're commenting on certain parts of my body. Oh, they're saying certain things to me and they're telling me certain things that they want to do with me. Wow. These fast connections, people who are moving fast with us. We don't see anything wrong with that. Like, great, instant friend. Wow, that didn't take very long. I just knew you an hour ago and now we're hanging out every day. And so we also can't tell the difference between love bombing and understanding the natural steps that are required in forming healthy relationships. Like, how can someone be in love with you 12 hours after they met you? But it gives you this high, right? It gives you this this really great feeling. And this addiction forms. That's the other thing that's taking place. Codependency is taking place. Because you do not have a very secure sense of yourself. You might have a lot of great qualities, but they're not seen by the general public. But then this person comes along to make you feel seen. And now you formed a connection with them based on that high of being seen. But then they trick you. They trick you because then they start to focus on everything that's wrong with you. You are your true, real self. As an autistic woman who is very literal and is also highly sensitive. And you get shamed for that. You also struggle with burnout. And you also experience a lot of exhaustion and social anxiety. And you get shamed for that too. But another element here is that as you're going through that, that kind of feels normal. Because autistic women, especially those who are undiagnosed, they're used to not being fully understood. They're used to not fitting in. They're used to feeling anxious and uncomfortable. So they don't associate this relationship in a negative way. They still associate it with their own relationship with themselves in a negative way. Something must be wrong with me. And sometimes we don't really notice that it actually is the other person until it's become really extreme, really serious, where we can't deny it. We're like, whoa, how did I get myself here now? How did this happen? Right? Because remember, the connection is moving very fast, and that's on purpose, is to get that bond formed quickly so the control features can take hold on you. What you might have let slide before, now you start to realize that was abusive. That's not acceptable. That was not something that was just in me and my fault. That was actually a fault in that person. But now, how do I get out of it? How do I get out of this now? And it can be really difficult to communicate that sort of thing. Because you've been accepting of this behavior for so long that the other person didn't think you had any problem with because you didn't have any boundaries. You didn't recognize it as such at the time to communicate that you didn't like that. You just hope that would go away and not return. Oh, well, that was not cool. I didn't really like that. I hope that doesn't happen again. And then it does happen again. And then you end up being berated for it when it happens again. Somehow it's always your fault. You've always done something wrong or said something wrong to make it your fault. And what also might be happening in the background is some financial manipulation, whatever that might look like, whatever kind of precarious situation they've gotten you into to financially depend on them or tie up your money in some sort of investments. But over time, things just become more and more complicated, more and more complicated. And you still don't know any of this stuff about yourself. You still just see like you're just not happy in this relationship, but maybe there's something in you that needs to change. And then the relationship will be better. Maybe it's me. Can't be them. Because you're so trusting, you're so accepting, you're so compassionate about towards other people. Remember, you have this affinity for people who struggle, who have had a hard life, who have had a rough go, who have been the underdog, because you know what that's about. But this is the wrong underdog to have an affinity towards. And having to come up with the executive functioning and get everything together and all your ducks in place to leave that relationship eventually is really difficult because you're overwhelmed and overridden with guilt and shame and anxiety about having to leave. Part of you knows that's what you need to do, but the other part of you doesn't know how, doesn't think you're strong enough to do it. And you might do it, and then you might go back. They say that women, on average, return to their abusive partners 6 times before they leave for good. That's a lot, which speaks to how difficult it is to actually finalize that decision, that choice, how much questioning you're actually going through in your head if you're making the right choice, and the difficulty and the struggles that are in the background with your own trauma, with finances, with personal strength and confidence, with family supports, which you might not have any, friendship supports, which you might not have any, community supports, which you may not have any of, or feel hesitant to access. So you feel like you're just doing this all on your own, because a lot of autistic people have gone through their whole life very independently, have had to do everything on their own. If you have children, sometimes that's the reason why you're leaving, is one thing that this has happened to me, but I can't let this happen also to my child. But let me just pause and say that you left that relationship. What about the next one that comes along? It's likely the same thing's going to happen again. It might just look different. And you might call it something else. You start to notice patterns, not necessarily in the people, but in yourself. You notice the patterns of the people that you're drawn to. You notice the patterns of behavior that you accept, that you permit. You notice the patterns in how you change your own persona to fit theirs. You notice the masking of yourself, the loss of your sense of self that takes place over time in these relationships. Codependency is a huge factor. You're losing your sense of self. You want to help them, but no one's helping you. And in the end, at the end of the day, missing social cues is still something that's happening to you. Missing red flags is still something that's happening to you. And so are you sort of a hazard to yourself to get into another relationship and therefore not pursue any new relationships? And that can be a real fear that a lot of people will have. It's like, they just don't trust themselves. You can have boundaries, yes. So there's some red flags that we can start to notice. This person is sharing too much. This person is texting me too much. This person has told me they love me within 24 hours of meeting me. So this is one thing that you can set some boundaries for. There are areas that you do have within your control. So if you are someone who is trying to live a sober life. Because that's another factor for autistic people, is they're drawn towards self-medicating. They're drawn towards substance use as a way to allow them to fit in and to feel less stress and less anxious and be more socially apt, to go out and do things and be part of the normal world. So there are things that are within your control. There's certain things that are not. I need to notice the red flags that are in me. Okay, what are my red flags? Being aware of my own red flags, taking responsibility for those things.